Hare Krishna, thank you for your patience. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 5, entitled The Meeting of Nanda Maharaj and Vasudev, and we're reading text number 27 and 28. So I'm going to read 27, and then we read 28 together. Text number 27. Bratarmama sutakachin matra sahababat braje tatam bhavataman vano bababhyam upalalita. Translation: My son Baladev, being raised by you and your wife Yashoda Devi, considered you his father and mother. Is he living very peacefully in your home with his real mother, Rohini? Text number 28. We chant together. Punsastri Bhargo Vihita Surido Hyanubhabita Natesho Klishyamaneshu Trivargortaya Kalpate Punsastri Vargo Vihita Shrido Hyanubhavita Nateshu Klishyamaneshu Trivargortorta Kalpate Punsastri Vargo Vihita Suhrido Hyanubhavita Nateshu Klishyamaneshu Trivargorthaya Kalpate. Please chant. Punsaha, of a person. Trivargaha, the three aims of life: religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Vihitaha, enjoined according to Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Sruhidaha, toward relatives and friends. He, indeed, Anubhavitaha, when they are properly in line. Na, not, teshu, in them, Krishyamaneshu, if they're actually in any difficulty. Trivargaha, these three aims of life arthaya, for any purpose, kalpate, does not become so. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. When one's friends and relatives are properly situated, one's religion, economic development, and sense gratification, as described in Vedic literature, in the Vedic literatures, are beneficial. Otherwise, if one's friends and relatives are in distress, these three cannot offer any happiness. Purport, very short purport. Vasudeva regretfully informed Nanda Maharaj that although he had his wife and children, he could not properly discharge his duty of maintaining them and was therefore unhappy. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasya Bhutale Srimate Prabhupada Swami. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Vacha Kalpatarubhyasha Kripasindu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. So Vasudev, in his talk with Nanda Maharaj, is expressing his unhappiness. And understanding the context of what we have been hearing throughout all this time of the position, the transcendental position and character of Vasudeva, it would be a mistake to try to understand Vasudeva's expressions of unhappiness as mundane, or sort of on the light of the experience of most of us who are not in the transcendental stage, but still affected by some material conception of life. Vasudeva expresses here that because of the circumstances that he have to go through, he hasn't been able to actually fulfill his duties as a householder. His duties, his religious duties according to the ashram that he belongs to. So we're talking about Grihastha ashram. And according to the laws that are there, the dharma, the laws, the principles of religions that has been given by the personality of Godhead, he have to fulfill certain duties. And according to the fulfillment of those duties, when those things are in place, it is explained that the natural, gradual, progressive elevation of consciousness happens to those who follow these principles. It's designed so that the elevation will happen, and at the same time there is satisfaction. There is prosperity and there is satisfaction. There is happiness. There is peacefulness. Everything is in place. So he's regretting here that circumstantially he hasn't been, what he has seen is his incapacity to be able to fulfill, to see the happiness of his wife, children, friends, and relatives. Specifically, he is present here of his son, Balaram, and his inquiries about his son, Krishna, and also acknowledging that his wife, second wife, Rohini, what to speak of Devaki, have to be going to such a hardships too. So he is not feeling happy because of that. But the fact is that all these emotions, I remember a class that His Holiness Ramapa Swami was speaking about, that all these emotions that are there, that are part of the human psyche, they originally come from the spiritual world, from the spiritual experience. All those emotions are there. So the emotion of love, the emotions of happiness, the emotions of excitement, the emotions of lamentation, of sadness, of anger, all these are present in the spiritual world. But there's a term that Srila Rupa Goswami uses for this, that they're secondary rasas that enhances the primary rasas, the 5 primary rasas, and brings the devotee to actually experience a much more intense attraction and connection with Krishna. So all these emotions that are there, that these transcendental, perfected devotees experience, they simply enhance their attachment and their love for Krishna, the relationship that they have. So, therefore, for us, who are, at least most of us who are affected, who are not still in that transcendental position, this type of emotions that we also experience they're not necessary, they're not in generally connected to Krishna center, but it's more connected into our personal experience. And therefore, they affect our consciousness. They affect ourselves in so many ways. Therefore, the recommendation of the Shastras is that we give up, or at least in the stage that we're still conditioned by these things, we simply tolerate the pushes of this happiness and distress, these emotions that comes with that. When happiness and distress, there is the hankering and lamentation. So these things arises from dualities, from the dualities of the world. Dvanda, mohena, from dualities. So, so we have to tolerate these things and proceed in the process of purification, to be able to come to at one point be transcendental to the effects of duality. And when that's there, then we can start to experience, when we free from the dualities of hankering and lamentation, we can start to experience the reality of the soul. What is that verse? prasanatma nasochati nakanchati. Brahma bhuta prasanatma nasochati nakanchati. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu nat bhaktin labate para. That when we're free, when we experience the happiness of the soul, this Brahma Bhuta means we start to experience the soul. At that point happens when we're free from this hanker and lamentation, with the effects of happiness and distress, with the effects of the dualities of this world. And at that point is that we can start devotional service. And when we enter into devotional service, free with the actual experience of the soul, we can start to enter into these rasas and experience it. So Vasudev is within that type of rasa, and that simply enhances his attachment to Krishna. Now, from the perspective, he also reveals the culture, the Vedic culture of Grihastha ashram. I was mentioned, I read on Srila Prabhupada that he says that this Artha, Dharma, Artha, and Kama, there's four goals of religions: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. These three, Dharma, Artha, and Kama, when we're affected by material desires and attachments, then these three are given in order to allow us to gradually elevate ourselves to desire renunciation of the world and then obtain moksha, liberation. So this process together they call pravriti marg. Pravriti marg means the gradual process of elevation. Is very organic and perfectly designed by Krishna. When is nicely followed, then there is elevation of consciousness to the point that one develops the desire of renunciation, and also one starts to cultivate the transcendental knowledge, because it's inbuilt in it. When it's properly performed. In the second chapter of the first canto, the first canto, yes, second chapter, the answers of Srila Sutta Goswami to the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya, divine, what is it? Divine, the divine and I can't remember the chapter name now. Divine nature. Let me see. Divinity and divine service. Then he gives a breakdown on how this process can be properly applied. One has to have the proper conception. So even to follow Dharma, one has to have the proper conception. The proper conception is given by the Brahmanas, who are overseeing the practices of Dharma for people. So every person in all the different ashrams has a particular duty, but it specifically becomes very important the following of all these different duties, especially social duties, family duties, and duties towards the other classes. For grihastas, it is explained that one is not only responsible for our own family, to make sure that they're properly situated, but also grihastas are responsible to maintain the other 3 ashrams, the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and the sannyas ashrams. So grihastas are the one who maintain. And so for grihastas, it's very important to be properly situated, prosperous, and happy to fulfill these duties. Therefore, it is necessary for grihastas to have this artha, or this economic development. One has to see that one's earning capacity allows one to fulfill these different duties. That's what Vasudeva's expression of unhappiness, because he was not able to fulfill these duties. And he was encouraging and praising Nanda Maharaj for his personal situation, that he was able to fulfill those duties. And he's actually inquiring, to making sure your relatives and your friends are all being nicely, the animals, all these different dependents on the grihasta, they were nicely taken care, because that means happiness, peacefulness, when one follows one's duties. When they're fulfilled, then you're peaceful. And that we see that, sometimes as grihastas, some of us who are grihastas, we go to different anxieties in terms of fulfilling those duties. Especially when you are a devotee, you're caught in a whole bunch of different, it adds all different elements, because the fact is that we're not living in Vedic times in which the whole society is organized in this system of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, this Pravriti mark. So everything is organized and designed and structured. So the principles of religions are upheld. But we're living in a time in which there is nothing, the whole thing is upside down. And the principles remain the same, but because there is not harmony, or there is not following of these religious principles, then the circumstances, the result is a very hellish situation. People are very unhappy and unfulfilled because they're not able to, even the principle remain the same. They want to take care of the things. People are naturally, especially civilized people, uncivilized people is another thing. But civilized people, they have the sense of they have duties toward family and society, towards the country, towards the communities. And they're in constant anxiety and very stressed about the fulfillment of these duties, social duties and family duties. And the fact is that even if they try hard, the whole thing is set up to disregard, to basically trample these duties. To the point that as time passes, society starts to rationalize living without fulfilling those duties. So little by little, things are shrinking and becoming, not necessary for society. So we see how families are being broken in terms, now the elderly have to fend for themselves. When you become a teenager, you start to be sort of like encouraged to leave. And what to speak of social, there's actually less connection among people. We can hardly know our neighbors. Everybody is sort of like an independent island. So there is no sense of community. There's less sense of community, less sense of everything. And even on the pious peoples that maintain that, there's still a lot of anxiety how to fulfill these things. It's enough to try to maintain a family, and a small family, of 1 children or 2 children like that. What to speak of also having the social duties of maintaining the renunciants, the brahmanas. So it's a lot of anxieties, and for devotee grihastas, it becomes challenging because you have to fit in a world that is competitive and that is basically, what is it, the fit, how's that say, that the most fit person is the one who, at the rate, yeah, survival of the fittest. So, you have to be ready. If you're a leader, you're not ready to fight, then you won't succeed, you won't survive. So you have to be out there, ready, and it's not necessarily what we understand transcendental and peaceful, meditative and devotional. But Prabhupada, I was listening last night to Prabhupada's Lilamrita. And there was one disciple who was helping him. His name was Subal. He was helping him during the Prabhupada has purchased the land for building the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, and he had these disciples who were, young disciples, helping him build the temple. And this devotee was lamenting and complaining to Srila Prabhupada that it's too much. I mean, to go through all the different negotiate things with Brijavasis, and they were sharp, and they will cheat you if you're a little bit, like that. And all these different things he was saying to Srila Prabhupada, with all these negotiations and managing and looking at this and that and all, I'm in complete anxiety. I cannot chant my rounds. I cannot think of Krishna at all. I cannot think of Krishna. I'm always thinking of, the construction materials, and if this one is going to cheat me of that. So I can't think of Krishna. So I don't think I can continue this. This is not good. I'm doing this, and what is the use of doing all this if I cannot think of Krishna? How can you think of Krishna when you actually collecting money and writing checks and negotiating this? I can't think of Krishna. So I prefer to retire. I like to, just be on my own and fully focus on hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada chastised him. He said, just see Arjuna. Do you think when Arjuna was in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was, while performing, killing other people, he was thinking of Krishna at that time? He was thinking, this army I have to kill. But that army that he had to kill was for the pleasure of Krishna. But he was thinking, he was on his task. He was not thinking, on some other thing. He was doing his business. His business was he was a warrior, and he had to kill. So he was on his task. But because his task was done for the pleasure of Krishna, then that was his service. So Prabhupada was bringing it to attention that while we do all these different things, when they're done for the pleasure of Krishna, then they are they're transcendental. They're devotional service. The whole thing is meant for one's elevation. Atapum birdija shestra vanashrama vibhagasha sanustitasha dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. That all base among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging one's duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste division and orders of life is to please the personality of Godhead. That is the principle. So when we're able to do that, then our work becomes our offering to Krishna, our sacrifice, our devotional service. And that is the key that we have to understand as grihastas. We have to work, and we have to be able to succeed. But that fight that is there is for the pleasure of Krishna, is to fulfill one's duties for Krishna's pleasure. And then it's possible. It's a whole science that we have to learn, and it's not simple to apply. Therefore, to succeed, we require to be under the shelter of a spiritual master. So we're properly guided, and we have the support of transcendental knowledge to be able to maintain the process, properly, especially in an environment that is not favorable. The case of Vasudeva, he was in an environment that was completely unfavorable for the fulfillment of his duties. But his main focus was to please the personality of Godhead, and in whatever situation he was able to fulfill his duty, to protect. He was able to protect Devaki. Sadly, he couldn't protect his children, but he did his best. There are things that are outside your control. He was able to protect Balaram, Krishna, and Rohini. So, in the circumstances, he's fulfilling his duties. When Krishna took birth, he gave in charity within his mind. So, like that. In our circumstance, obviously, it's not that difficult, like Vasudeva, but nevertheless, we have to face the difficulties that we have to encounter, and we have to figure it out, or how you say, tackle them under the guidance of transcendence or transcendental knowledge. Any comments or questions? Back to Kevin.
Krishna Prabhu, thank you for class. I was wondering when you said that in the spiritual world, all the emotions that we have here in the material world, like happiness and sadness, joy and excitement, things like that, they're all coming from the spiritual world. So, was it? Were you saying before that? Even in the spiritual world, we actually have sadness also. Was that one of the categories? Like people can experience sadness in the spiritual world also?
Yeah. They call secondary rasas. There are 7 secondary rasas. Let me see if I can find a list here of them. I can't fully remember all of them. Hold on one second. Well, okay, I can find it immediately. Oh, here we go. Anger, astonishment, shall you pronounce chivalry?
Chivalry. Yeah.
Compassion, ghastly, fear, laughter, wonder. There's more. There's not a. Oh, here's a better one. Okay. One is anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, mercy. No. This is all together with the 5. Okay, I start again. Anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, mercy, horror, shock. Horror and shock. So these are things, that we all, and these are present, and they come in different manifestations within the devotees. And there is certain, my spiritual master was explaining that there's certain pastimes of the Lord that are sort of highlighted by some of these emotions. I gave the example of the pastimes of Lord Ramachandra that are completely permeated by this lamentation, sadness, this emotion. So the whole pastime is, there is some, whatever happiness is there ends, in some disaster that goes through the whole thing of lamentation. So all the characters have to go through that. And the mood is the mood is permeated, and even when you read Ramayan, you're also experiencing that sort of like sadness and lamentation. From Dasarat Maharaj dying out of sadness, and the whole family in tremendous distress. And then, Lord Ramachandra goes, he's very happy in the jungle with Sita Devi and Lakshman, and then Sita gets kidnapped, and the whole thing goes into this tremendous lamentation. And then, they rescue Sita, and then there's happiness again, there's a kingdom, everybody's happiness, and then some washermen start to criticize Sita, and then Lord Ram have to banish Sita, pregnant with the 2 children. The whole thing goes into tremendous lamentation. And then the children grow, and then, Lava and Kush comes to the kingdom, sings the Ramayan, everybody's in life in this hope that Sita will be reestablished again, that everybody will get to know the tremendous, horrible thing that happens. And then there were still doubts, and Sita just decided, that's it. In order to be able to give Lava and Kush a life without having to have anyone doubting them, then she gave up her life and she entered into earth again. And then everything was, the rest of their life, Lord Ramachandra have to live, on this sadness that pervades the whole pastime. But Prabhupada Swami explains that that sadness and that anguish just enhance to an extreme level the attachment to Lord Ramachandra. And also that is experienced with Lord Chaitanya during his pastimes in Jagannath Puri as a sannyas, right? We hear about the Vipralamba Baba, or the love in separation, which was the same anguish that the gopis experienced with Krishna left Vrindavan. So that's an example of one emotion that enhances. In the case of, Sri Rupa Goswami explains of Bhishmadev experiencing chivalry, the emotions like that, and then when he was throwing arrows at Krishna, it was like, for him, it was like, throwing flowers. It was his offering, and the arrow will pierce Krishna, and then blood will be coming out, and like that, and Krishna will receive the arrow with joy. He will throw the arrows with joy, but it was, like they're fighting, and they trying to hurt the other one. And then Krishna comes, in great anger, ready to smash with a wheel, the head of Bhishmadev, and Bhishmadev looking at Krishna, rushing at him, with a wheel, and ready to smash him. He was like, it was the biggest ecstasy that he had. It was the best, the highest, because that was his mood. So when Bhishma was ready to leave his body, that was the image that came to him, Krishna rushing at him. So that was this. So, yeah. For us, it's different. For us, if we artificially get into this type of thing, that's sahaja. That's a pretentious type of thing. So for us, the recommendation is when we get into these all different emotions that disturbs, our focus, mata sparsas takunteyashitoshnishukadukada. We have to tolerate. We have to tolerate and continue, our focus. And it takes practice. Anything else? Krishna Archana.
You were discussing, the fulfillment of grahastha duties, and pointing out that actually under the circumstances, Vasudev was fulfilling his duties as best he could, because he had in fact brought Krishna and Balaram into a safe environment. I was just reflecting when you were saying, actually, in some sense, he was fulfilling his duties through his brother Nanda,
right.
Because his brother Nanda was then bringing up Krishna and Balaram and also taking care of Rohini. So, indeed, just through putting them in that, under the care of his brother, the
right.
duty was being fulfilled.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was his position. I mean, he wished he could be able to do it himself, and that was his sadness. But nevertheless, he understood it's Krishna's will, and so he was all right. You have a question, Keshav, bro?
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. When we say pleasing Krishna, is it to, I don't know, I related with sin, that he is pleased because we're out of sin, we're not committing sinful activities. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not for the heck of his enjoyment, but because we are doing our own thing, that is being away from sinful activities, isn't it?
Yes.
When you say repeatedly, it's for the pleasure of Krishna, we're doing this to please Krishna. Is it for pleasing him and having him happy, or because he's happy because we're out of sin?
Yeah, there is three types of actions. There's akarma, karma, and vikarma. Remember that from the Bhagavad Gita. And so karma is when one performs duties according to religious principles. and that gives, piety. So vikarma is when one acts not according to religious principles, and that causes sinful reactions. And akarma is when one is performing for the pleasure of Krishna, and there's no reaction. It's a transcendental. So, so those who are in the akarma, that path is called nivritti marg, and those who are in karma follow religious principles. It's called pavritti marg. So we have to be in either, both are bona fide. We have to be in either one. When we are under Krishna's system fully, is devotional service, then that is nivritti marg. It's a direct process. But the pavritti marg, the gradual process, is prescribed by Krishna. It's just a much longer process. You have to go to the steps of the yoga ladder. Sin means when you are not acting according to religious principles, so we have a sinful reaction. So yes, we're not. That's not meant for humans to actually break the laws, civilize. So then we have to. That's why it's important for us to stop activities that are sinful. And when it's sinful, means that they're against the prescriptions that are given by Krishna and by the scriptures.
Thank you.
Rasa Mataji.
Okay, so you were saying that as grihastas we have responsibilities, and like Arjuna, he was fighting, he wasn't thinking about Krishna, although it was an offering to Krishna, but while he was fighting, he was not necessarily thinking about Krishna, he was thinking about killing. Am I understanding that correctly?
I was sort of remembering what Prabhu is making a point. In reality, is the prescription is given by Krishna in the Gita, tasmai sarveshu kaleshu man anusmara yudhyacha, while fighting, think of me. Okay. So there is no separation, but what I understood, you heard that also. What I understood, we were listening together to Prabhupada's Lilamrita. So what I understood Prabhupada was saying, making the point, is that you have to perform you have to put your head in your duty. His act was to kill. So he was thinking, okay, I have to kill that guy, and that one is coming. He's like focusing on his work.
Yes.
But because it's connected with Krishna, it was for the pleasure of Krishna, it's automatically, there's no separation on that. Okay. That's how I understood it. Yeah. So we can take it out of context and say, so I don't have to think of Krishna. No, we have is part of it. So I think, thank you for helping me clarify that. Yeah.
It was just a little gray, just because, I don't know, my personal experience is being in a material situation where you're fighting, you're mentally fighting. I could relate to that story of that, Subal Das in Vrindavan, going through the troubles where it's mentally it's like you're in a chess game, so you're mentally like drawn into it, and you're constantly having to reflect, did I do the right thing? What's going to happen next? I have to plan ahead. And that kind of has a tendency to take over your mental process, right? To where at some point it becomes disturbing. And then you also hear, I hear a lot of advice being given that you should always think about, is what I'm doing, enhancing my spiritual life? Is it favorable to my spiritual life? Is it favorable to pleasing Krishna, or is it not? And that's where I think the gray area of making those decisions becomes so hard, is in many cases it's technically serving Krishna, or you could, I don't know, I guess your brain can rationalize anything. Well, this is my duty. I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm offering it to Krishna, but I have to fight, and there are all these consequences to it, and it's mentally affecting me in a very negative way. So I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a question, but I'm just reflecting on that.
No, it's important. It's important reflection, because it's something that we have to constantly face. Ultimately, what I understand is that our spiritual life is the most important thing. So if we are in a situation that we becoming too disturbed, or is too unfavorable, then why not finding a better, arrangement? One can fulfill, is that, it's also that recommendation of Srila Sutta Goswami, that we just need to make an arrangement for a simple life in which we have whatever we need to be satisfied, and self-preservation. So to be able to fulfill material duties, but the most important thing is that we have a space for inquiring about the absolute truth. The life desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. So at the end, really, if our work is not allowing us to go deeper into understanding our relationship with Krishna, is too much, then why not trying to find other ways of making a living like that, And that's part of our grihastha process. It's a constant evaluation, but we need guidance, because in general, when you are in the thick of these things, you always need, a transcendental perspective, because it can be quite overwhelming, Arjuna had that situation. That's the example of Arjuna. It was overwhelming to figure it out, how to fulfill all these duties, harmonize them, and the solution came when he saw Krishna as a spiritual master and took guidance, like that. So yeah, it's an important part of our growth in Grihastha ashram, to be facing all these things and making the choices that help us continue our personal growth. And Krishna doesn't miss that. It's actually, he's helping us come to that and accept his guidance, and his representative.
Yes, one more question. So at which point is it service to Krishna, or like a self-purification process? So you can think like you're going through a very difficult time or a challenging situation, and you're in the discharge of your duty, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm offering this to Krishna, but maybe it's more of a purification process. I'm supposed to fight, or I'm supposed to do all these things that I would not necessarily want to do, or they're not good for me, as far as, I don't know, it's disturbing to my mind, but it's part of my purification process, like I have to go through this to learn from it, or I don't know, I guess is there a fine line there too?
Yeah, I think at all times it's service. It's just, it goes to different levels. In one sense, things get really settled and clear when one is under the shelter of a spiritual master. So when the spiritual master tells you, like in the case of Subala Das, or at time, I think he was a Swami, Prabhupada was directly asking him to do that. He was in very intense desire of Srila Prabhupada. So at the end, the ones who took the service was Jamuna and Gurudas. And, they received tremendous mercy from Srila Prabhupada. But, the spiritual master is telling you, here's your duty. And you do to your best of your abilities, He says, Prabhupada was explaining, the Lilamrita was saying that they were inexperienced, so Prabhupada have to be constantly coaching them to how to do business. And, at the same time, they were doing the Bombay thing, which was, they all went, it was completely bewildering. And they couldn't understand why Srila Prabhupada was, the devotees, why Srila Prabhupada was so fixated in getting that land that was in the middle of a jungle, nowhere in Bombay. So, and he was not going to give up that land. And they couldn't understand. They say, just give up the land. Why going through all these tribulations? In the middle of a jungle, no one goes there. Prabhupada has a different vision, and you see. No one could understand. So when we're in the shelter of a spiritual master, a lot of things is almost like a big boulder comes out of our shoulders, to figure it out. It becomes clear, okay, this is what I have to do. And then you can always offer your doubts. I don't know if this is what I have, I'm trying, but it's all these difficulties, now I'm facing all these things. I cannot think of Krishna, and then you hear, no, keep going, remember, or, yeah, maybe we have to look for some alternative, it's always like that. It's a process, but it's important that we go through the process with guidance and having that faith that, we're always towards the right path. All right, so I stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.